This video is going to talk about the graphing capabilities of the graphing calculator. To start out with, the buttons for most of the graphing capabilities are located right below the viewing window. There's the Y = button, the window button, the zoom button, the trace button, and the graph button. Up above those, accessed by the second function key, are stat plots, table set, format, calculator, and table. We're going to just look briefly today a little bit into the graphing capabilities, and we're going to start by entering an actual function into the graphing calculator. The place that is done is in the Y = button. If you press on the Y = button, you'll notice several Y1, Y2, Y3, and so on appear on the screen. There are actually 10 equations that you can actually enter into the graphing calculator at the same time. We're going to put in a simple linear equation. We're going to type in y = 2x + 5, so we're going to type a 2. To get to the variable x, there's a button called the xt(θ)n button. It's located right here. So 2x + 5 we're going to put in. At this point, we could press graph and see if anything appears, but we don't know what our window is set out, so we might see nothing. So we're going to hit graph, and we actually don't see anything on the screen. That's because our viewing window is set. And we can do that by hand, or we can look here under window and do that by hand. We can actually put values into this by hand. But to do something a little simpler, we can go into the zoom button, and there's something called a standard window, which is number 6 here. We can either cursor down and enter 6, or we can just type a 6. And this is a standard window that graphs our line in a 10 by 10 window. So with this, now if we look at window now, we're going from -10 to 10 in both directions, in the X and Y direction, and we're scaling this by 1. So that means that each tick mark in our graph here on our axes, each of these tick marks are worth 1. We can actually trace along this graph with the trace button, and this will approximate as we move. We can use the left and right buttons, and we can trace along our line and get some approximate values. For the line, it's working on little pixels, so these can be just approximations. If we want to get a little bit more accurate as to what our ordered pairs are in this particular equation, we can look in the table, which would be a second function, graph. Right up above that is table. And here's our table. So this is actually entering ordered pairs into our equation. And I can show you what our equation was here. Our equation was 2x + 5. So this table is actually putting 0 in for x, multiplying by 2 and adding 5, and a 5 is coming out. So this is a really nice feature in our graphing calculator to be able to look at our table. The way that we can get our table to work is under table set, so that's also a second function window. Right above that there's a table set. And we can start our table at any value we want. We can increment it by any value. In this case we're incrementing by 1. And we can also have a feature where we actually move down here and we switch over to ask. And then when we look at our table, so if we actually go back to our table now, we actually can enter any value. So say if we wanted to evaluate this equation y = 2x + 5 at 100, we could type in 100 for x, and we could press enter, and it's going to give you 205 coming out of that function. So this is just a brief little overview on how to enter graphs into the graphing calculator and look at the tables.